So just a recap, last Monday, we initially started with our discussion on research design. Particularly, we discussed about a sample problem, which was in relation to a study on the effects of social media hashtags, no, on the ability on the effects of course, the effects of social media hashtags in spurring American politicians to take action on certain pertinent issues. No? So that was the example that we had last Monday. And basically, we ended up with, we were trying to look at what would be the best research design to do in relation to this research problem. So we determined that a retrospective study design would be best to use in determining the extent of how social media hashtags or posts can spur politicians to take action on certain issues. No? So the retrospective study design, we found out that it would be best to initially start off with, let's look at this conceptual framework. It would be best to look at data about a past event. No? So since this is a retrospective design, it means that we are determining the effect of a certain variable through past data. So the past data that we determined were in relation to the Black Lives Matter issue, for example, on racial discrimination in America. So how effective were social media posts in catching the attention of American politicians and in spurring them to take action on those issues. So with that, we found that we basically found that a retrospective design is more practical here, because then we will be able to study a past event, na, and in doing so, we will see the effect of social media in. The researcher will study the effect of social media during the Black Lives Matter, the peak of the Black Lives Matter protests around June, no, in calling politicians to take action on racial discrimination. So with that was what we found out. So basically, that was an introduction to the discussion on research designs. And this afternoon class, we are going to base our lecture on our textbook as usual. So kindly go to page 94. Please do get your copies of the book and follow. So this afternoon, we're going to go through the following topics. I'll just here the discussion on research design. So we're going to try to go through the lessons now. They're already in lesson problem or ethics as well. So theoretical framework and conceptual framework. I think this is already lesson 6 now. So this is research methodology, or rather research designs. And then we are also going to proceed to the next topic, which is on, in the calendar, I labeled it as statistics, but today, I think we're just going to look through measurement scales, collecting data using attitudinal scales, or rather measurement scales, selecting a sample. Okay, yes, selecting a sample, and then some statistical statistical methods of analysis of data, or rather statistical methods of sample selection. But I think it's still under selecting a sample. So we'll just focus on these two lessons as well for this afternoon very quickly. All right. So that is lesson 6 and 7. So this afternoon, we're going to go through research designs and measurement scales. For measurement scales, we are going to look through how to create measurement scales class, not just like the measurement scale that we used or that we referred to in the discussion last Monday on measuring the scale to measure the degree to which social media can call out world leaders. So this is an example of a measurement scale. Is there when we measure the degree to which social media can call out world leaders, is there a high degree to which social media can call out world leaders when it comes to the number of posts? No? So if X number of posts is achieved, would world leaders, or rather, would our politicians take action if it reaches that amount of posts, like or likes? No, for that in that case. So that is an example of a measurement scale. Is there a medium degree or a low degree? So that's that is the lesson. So I will just refer to the page numbers in the book for today on these lessons, but basically that would be the coverage for today. So let's start off with lesson 6, not research design, or rather we're just going to continue with the discussion on research designs. Now, last Monday, we just basically had an example of how research design can be applied. And quite frankly, class, I just looked through your exam, actually in the prelims. As what I mentioned last Monday, I'm going to try to return your papers by Saturday at least. So when I reviewed your prelim exam, actually you were able to do well, man, class, in the prelim exam overall. But I think one weak area of everybody is the conceptual framework portion. Only I think 2 students were able to really do a conceptual framework correctly, and the rest were wrong, no, murag sayop ang pagkahimo sa conceptual framework because as you can recall, although we're going to address that, no. So if you can recall, in the exam there was a question, or there was a task wherein you were going to create a conceptual framework on a research problem that you wrote, no, in the exam as well. So basing from the research problem that you wrote in the exam, you were asked to create a conceptual framework. And let's just clarify that, class, because I think it's really important for us to master the idea of the conceptual framework and master the skill of creating a conceptual framework before we can actually proceed to making the research design, and also how to actually create how to choose the tools to use, no, in doing the study. So and also, class, there were only 2 groups that submitted their assignment for theoretical framework and conceptual framework last February. So I think that was in the after our last class, no, kanang duwa ka grupo ang nagpasa sa ilahang conceptual framework o theoretical framework, ang uban wala pa nagpasa. So I can't really say if nakuha na gid ninyo ang skill sa paghimog conceptual framework. So karon, I would like to ask those groups who haven't passed their conceptual framework activity yet, as well as their theoretical framework activity, to kindly pass your work lang. Although passed naman sa deadline, pero palihog lang kung ipasa lang ang inyong work para ma-check na ko. And please inculcate the lessons that you have learned this week on how to write a conceptual framework, no? Basically, you're supposed to pass the conceptual framework of your thesis, like ang inyong thesis, and sa naman ang what is the plan, no, of the study. So please do pass that as soon as you can. Deadline would be tomorrow, yeah. Manara ba ang deadline sa inyong RRL, o Monday na ang deadline sa chapter 1? So yes, just submit that, and then please make sure that you will do a good job as well. Kay kung dili bitaw ninyo ma-master ang conceptual framework kay magklase gyud ta ani after midterms, kailangan ginato na siya nga or like mag-appeal ko og question sa midterms nga maghimo na sad mo conceptual framework na sakto, and then what will come out in the midterm exam will be lesson 6, 7, and then lesson 8, lesson 8 and 9. So lesson 8 and 9, our next topics will be on tools, no, for research, and then data analysis ta next week. So kana upat ka topics ang coverage sa midterms. And idugang pod nako ang conceptual framework. So you need to pass that, no, kay kung dili ninyo na siya mapasar kay magklase ta usab niya kanang mag-exam sa taos. No, mag-exam pa ba ta? Siguro long quiz na lang or somewhat we'll just look at that lang. So I need you to pass your midterm exam mo, not akong goal. So now let's proceed, class, no. If you have any questions throughout this lecture, don't hesitate to speak out. And if there is any concept that is unclear to you, please ask a question. And also, this will be a very complicated lesson kaning research designs, kay daghan kaayo research designs, and medyo libog yun siya, pero I would like you to ask questions lang. Make sure nga kasabot mo sa kada research design na i-explain ako. All right. Before I start, I'll just drink some water. Excuse me. So let's begin. Now, kindly proceed to page 94, class, of the textbook, and we'll resume our lesson on research design. I might go very fast, everybody, kay kuan man gud ni siya crash course ni sa tanan. Unya dagan patag i-discuss na this afternoon. So let's start now. So last time, basically, we learned from last meeting that a research design is a plan, no? So it refers to a plan, structure, or strategy of investigation. So this is a blueprint or detailed plan for how a research study is to be completed. So there are several examples of a research, or rather, this pertains to the conceptual framework. So the conceptual framework and the research design go hand in hand. Giving as an example, the conceptual framework we came up with last time. So is it clear sa inyong side? I hope okay ra ni siya nga kadako, no? Okay, anyway, so this is an example of actually we will start, it's not exactly a perfect conceptual framework. Kuan pa ni siya kaning doodle lang ni siya technically, dili pa ni maog yun. Maybe kining a part o kini sakto ni siya, scale to measure the degree. Pero an actual conceptual framework, we would have to add a box here that would say how would we get the information. We would get the information through secondary data, no? So sifting through Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and matching the online activity to news reports, actual social media posts, interviews, on the reaction of leaders to the trending social media posts. So yes, this is the example. Let's just use that. Okay. So supposing ang conceptual framework na din ani, it would look something similar to secondary data. Sifting through Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, daghano eh. So that's one aspect of the study. Right, and then this so the conceptual framework, basically the input would be, we would look at secondary data, sifting through these channels na on posts on Black Lives Matter. Rough pa na siyang outline, and then aside from this, we are then going to also look through what. So this is secondary data, and then we are going to also look through matching online activity to news reports, actual social media posts, interviews on the reaction of American leaders to the trending social media posts on Black Lives Matter. So this also refers to secondary data. It would be better if we were specific, in the sense that if we actually specified what period in time that was, so we can also indicate the fact that it would be best to have had that in 2020. So secondary data na. In 2020. This is also specific to 2020, since this is a retrospective study. Okay. So with that, piot na siya gamay class. Ato lang ni i-extend gamay. All right. So that would be how the conceptual framework would roughly look like. And with that, okay, so now we see the framework being that the information would be, I'm not sure if this would follow. No, I think that is basically the flow. Of course, we look through the posts, social media posts first, and then the effect of the post on the politicians' reactions, and then we develop the scale to measure the degree to which social media can call out world leaders. And in analyzing the scale, we will determine the power of social media to call out politicians. So this is a rough conceptual framework, and in doing so, we are able to arrive at the design now, which is, we see that we are going to use a retrospective design. I think this is relatively simple. So yes, a retrospective research design. Let's just write the word design there. Okay, so with that, let's now look through important aspects of class of research design. All right. So in this part of the book, in the chapter on the research design, we are going to study some concepts now, like independent variable, dependent variable control group, as well as independent variables, control groups, then extraneous variables, and chance variables as well. So chance variables, extraneous variables, independent variables, dependent variables, and then the control group. So for the research design, we shall look through how to identify the independent variable and the dependent variable, because some of your responses in the prelim exam as well were could have used some modification lang class no mura kailangan na ninyo i-modify gamay ang the independent variables that you identified. So let's start off with the research design itself. Okay. Okay, here. So starting in the section on the theory of causality and the research design. So basically in this section, we are trying to say that there is a cause and effect relationship class. Now let's use another Jamboard. So in a research design, we have the cause of something or the cause of a phenomenon, and then what is the effect of that phenomenon. Now, supposing that that is basically the gist of the independent variable and the dependent variable, and variables pertain to factors class no that would influence your study, or rather the cause and effect of your study. So for instance, in the example that we had, the cause of the effect that we were trying to study was politicians' actions, no? Effect is politicians spurring politicians to take action on important issues. So that's the effect, and then the cause of politicians taking action is social media, trending social media posts on important issues. So here we see that the cause of, so we see here class that the cause of the action of a politician is the attention, not the trending social media post. Supposing this is what we're trying to investigate, right? So this is the cause of the action of the politician. So laka ka na daga na kayo gabash sa ako kay wala ko'y gabuhaton about sa racial discrimination. So na ako'y buhaton about it. So na ading gibuhat ang American politician. So that's there is a cause and effect. And then in that sense, here, kindly just apply it to your own research or thesis as well. What are you trying to study? For example, for the group on OFW migrants, na. So for the group on OFW migrants, I believe that you're trying to study the effect of OFW parents and their children. So here, you would say that what is the effect of so the cause would be parental absence. Is that all right? Elaine, Jamaica, and Mary Joy, you can just inform me if I'm wrong, no? So parental absence. So the cause of a child's growing age. So probably ang bata kay pagdako niya wala yang parents kasi epekto ana sa bata. So unsa na mo nag in English? So parental absence due to parental absence because a parent is working abroad, right? So that's the cause. So since the parent is absent, then the effect would be, what are the effects on the child? So the effect would be all of the effects. You're trying to determine all of the effects actually, but the cause is definitely parental absence due to so many sayop lagi ni. Parental absence because a parent is working abroad. So the effect would be, you're trying to determine all of the effects. So let's try to phrase that in a in a more noun way, or like we're trying to determine a noun that we're trying to determine. So what are we trying to determine here? Now, parental absence because a parent is working abroad. So that we're trying to determine the effects, no? Effects on a child of an OFW parent. Okay? So that's what we're trying to the cause would be parental absence. So what is the effect? The effects on a child of does it really is it logical? So does it mean that tanang sa nato ha, parental absence because a parent is working abroad, and then the effect is the effects on a child of an OFW parent? I think kuan siya, sakto man siya. Okay, this is what you're trying to determine man technically. Doesn't mean nga na ay cause and effect, no? So the effect will be the effects on a child of an OFW parent. Wait lang class ha. Yeah, I think this is right. Developmental effects. Specify na to sa type of effects. Of parental absence. Developmental effects to a child's sa mga specific na aspects sa bata ang ginatry na yung measure. The developmental effects to a child's social growth or social growth, unsa man, social growth niya, psychological growth niya, unsa, social, psychological growth due to parental absence of an OFW parent. Okay, so just to clarify now, the developmental effects to a child's social and psychological growth due to parental absence of an OFW parent. So I think this is clearer. So we are trying to investigate this. So the question is, what are the developmental effects to a child's social and psychological growth, no, due to parental absence of their OFW parent, right? So with that is what we are trying to determine. So the question is, what are the, I think mao man na inyong ginatry og determine, di ba, Elaine, Jamaica, and Mary Joy? I'm just trying to use it as a discussion point. Class had dili ni siya nga para makuan. This is just for us to be assisted lang. I'm just trying to maybe assist you in your conceptual framework. So kuan siya kaning so the question could be, what are kanida yung tanan, no? Sakto ko, guys, dili.
Ma'am, na ako'y question, ma'am.
Yes, Marb.
Kaning about sa conceptual framework, ma'am, baka tong kuan kay sa senior high magud na mo, ma'am, kay kanang for example amo study kay kanang murag effects of kanang smoking sa students, tapos na din ni kanang dependent variable, tapos independent variable, then adin to intervening variable.
Oo.
In ato, ma'am, tapos dili parehas atong sa imong example sa conceptual framework, ma'am.
Oo. So kuan naman good ni siya, Marb, we are actually integrating the research method already in the conceptual framework. So indeed, in a conceptual framework, mao man na siya na independent variable, na apoy dependent variable. In this case, let's look at the example earlier, no, there is a social media. So kani sa social media, ang independent variable is the social media post. Mo man siya independent variable kay mao man siya ang cause sa effect, no? Mao ni siya ang cause, the cause of we are trying to determine the extent to which social media can have an effect on politicians' actions. So reaction so mo ni siya ang ang dependent variable. nganong mao man ni siyang dependent variable, simple raman ang independent ug dependent variable nga concepts. Ang independent variable mo na siya ang ga-cause sa unsay mo gina-study. So ang cause sa politicians' actions is the social media nga posts. So mo na siya ang cause, and then ang effect dayon niya is nag-act ang politician. That's why nga mo ni ang dependent variable, ga depende ang action sa politician sa social media nga post sa mga katawhan. So since mo ni siya ay independent variable o dependent variable, makita nato nga appeal siya sa conceptual framework. So ang kanida yung intervention, wala tay intervention diri kay lahi man gud din siya nga study, kay wala intervention gi-apply diri. Unless if sa uban studies kinaaman sila intervention nga like ang effects sa smoking sa students, unya like unsa may intervention nga buhaton, if na intervention gibutang wala man sad. So kani man siya technically pareha ra siya Marb sa gitudlo sa inyo sa senior high, pero wala kanang I guess akong lecture wala na ko siya nakakuan masad ko pronounce masad ko nga na ay dependent variable katupang sa first nato nga lectures before. So I hope that's clear, Marb. Okay. Now so yeah, what are the developmental effects to a child's social and psychological growth due to the parental absence of their OFW parent? I think mas klaro na siya nga question, pero dili ko sure if mauni ang ginatry o determine sa group. And in any case, this is just an example na. So, since that is what we're trying to determine, so here we see the developmental effects to a child's social and psychological growth due to parental absence of their OFW parent. Where mo na siyang effect, no? Yeah, basically, so kung diri pa nga kuan nga scheme kay kani siya ang that box would go here. But in any case, the cause is the absence of the parent. So I believe this would be the independent variable, no? Since we're determining the absence of the parent during childhood, then the effect would be the developmental effects to a child, no, when the parent is absent. So in the case of the research design, that is the independent variable, no, kini siya. And then what's the importance of the independent variable? Basically, kini siya kay it will help you to determine what you're going to measure in your study. Dili na lang ako isulat sa taas para klaro lang. Naroon din color. And then here, nagklase ko pa. Okay. All right. So that's basically the scheme class. So anything nasulat ani nga column kay independent variable na siya, anything na nasulat ani nga column kay ang dependent variable. So now in this study, parental absence because a parent is working abroad, and then ang effect din kay ang effect sa child social and psychological growth due to parental absence. So kani ang atong gina-try mo ni siyang na-effect, no, or what we're trying to determine. Maybe we'll use this example for the whole lecture class on research designs. So let's now proceed to, we may also extend this lesson siguro sa Monday. Yeah. Maybe we'll discuss about selecting a sample on Monday. So on Monday, our lessons will be on selecting a sample as well as using determining the tools to use in research. Today, we're just going to discuss lesson 6, research designs, and determining or creating measurement scales. So, okay, let's go to the book. Now, in the book, so we were discussing about the theory of causality in page 97, causality and the research design. So determining what is the cause and what is the effect of your or what are the variables that you're studying, that will lead us to determining how to make a plan of action, no? And so make a plan for our research. So, all right. Now, going to the definitions here in the book, page 98. I hope my screen is visible to everybody. So any variable that is responsible for bringing about a change is called an independent variable. So in the case of the example earlier, we saw that what is causing a change in a child's social and psychological growth is the presence of their parent. So apparently, a child's social and psychological growth is dependent on their parents, on the presence of their parents. If a parent is there when they grow up, then there could be, and I know some of you might relate to this now because some of your parents are working abroad. I also have cousins and aunts who are in other countries, and this is a prevalent, dili prevalent ang term, pero kanang common ni siya. This is a common aspect of Philippine society that we have OFW relatives and family members. And here in this example though, okay, so what is causing the change in a person's in a child, or is there even a change in a child's social and psychological growth if their parent is there or not? So but supposing no na assumption nga naay effect ang absence sa parents sa growth sa bata. So in the social and psychological growth sa bata, specific siya no nga sa iyahang way nga mag-relate siya sa lain o sa iyahang own nga well-being as a person, kanang apektado ba sa iyaha sa presence sa iyang mama or sa iyang parent, no? So with that kay so what is causing the change to a child's social and psychological growth? We are assuming that it is the parents' presence no, in a child's life. So that is the independent variable. In this case, in the other example that we had earlier, so what is causing the change of a politician's action? What is causing the change is the social media post, or maybe I think the bottom line is the fact that they are being pressured, no? Dili man siguro ang post ang kuan ang nakapa-spur siya to act, but I think what is spurring that politician to act is the pressure from the people. So I think mas maayo nga tan-awon ang social pressure from the constituents, no? And we are assuming ang social pressure comes in the form of social media na in our generation. So ako lang na siya i-parenthesis ang social pressure. And with that, kana siya ang, so what is causing the change? Again, what is causing the change of a politician's behavior? It is the social pressure. So the social pressure is the independent variable because this is causing the change. And the parent's absence is the independent variable because this is causing the change to their child's growth, no, social and psychological growth. I hope that's clear. Now let's go to the concept of the dependent variable. So the dependent variable is the change in the degree of marital problems was dependent upon counseling. Kani kinagamit gapon siya og example, but basically the dependent variable refers to what is changed. So the dependent variable is what is the effect, basically, just like what I said earlier. So here, class, I think you have access to this Jamboard already. Gishare naman ako ni last Monday. So kani here, as what we noted, the dependent variable is on is the child's social and psychological growth, no, which is dependent on their presence, on their parents' presence. And then, as mentioned earlier, the dependent variable is the politician's action because this is dependent on social pressure. So kung walay pressure, di po siya mulihok siguro. Ana siguro to assumption. Ni akong nang mama, okay ra ang iyahang social and psychological growth mo ng assumption. That's why science or research is always based on assumptions, class, and if the assumptions are verified through the whole research process, you already know that. So now let's go to here we're going to look at another example. No, if pwede na ko ma-share gikan sa isa ka group sa class. I think this is, I can also maybe share lang ang kaning sa here, no. This is another conceptual framework from one of the groups in this class, no. So the research problem is what kind of help do poor families need during the pandemic. So the independent variable, what is causing the change, or rather we are trying to determine recommendations on the type of help that low-income countries in the low-income families in the Philippines need during this time. So yeah, again, what we're trying to determine is the recommendations on the type of help that low-income families need during the pandemic. And the recommendations are dependent on the type of help that low-income families need. So for example, kaning sa for instance, in relation to, let's say, scenario, no, I heard class in a documentary nga natoy documentary ang Pulse Asia man siguro to sa Manila na daghan man mga informal settlers sa Manila, no, and when lockdown started naagid sila kanang documentary sa mga families nga kanang grabe to bangalan ana nga kanang ga source sila mga leftover nga food sa merkado nya motoy lang gakanon kay gagutom sila karon during the lockdown, and ana sila so with that kay unsa di ang type of help na kailangan nila karon kay para natay ma-recommend sa gobyerno. Although I think naa naman na siya available na nga data, pero I guess ang lacking siguro karon kay ang assistance nga gakaabot sa ilaha, not sure if naa na sa assistance nga nagakadawat, no. So now in order for us to give recommendations to the government, it would be good for us to know what type of help they actually need. And that can be determined through survey, I guess. But before we go to the survey or maybe secondary data, diri kay gibutang na natog secondary data, no, kay assuming nga naanay study gibuhat or survey gibuhat sa mga low income families karon kung sa ilang type of need na kailangan. So here in this example, we are just trying to focus on what policy what we are going to recommend to the local government. Perhaps kana lang ang ginatry nato og kanang focus ang policy on sa may policy recommendations in order to assist the poor right now. So with that, the dependent or rather we're trying to look at the cause and effect. The cause being that simple naman siya actually. Ang cause is the cause of the type of help have an effect on the recommendation nga ihatag nato sa government. Ingana ra ang kuan ang cause and effect relationship. So with that kay let's say for example they need livelihood, no. So muna siya ang livelihood would depend on, or rather the program would depend on what type of help they need. So again, since the program would depend on what type of help they need, so the program is the recommendations class depends on the type of help that they need. So since the recommendations are dependent on the type of help that they need, so the recommendations is the dependent variable, and then the type of help that they need is the independent variable. To make it simple, as an example, no, let's say assuming they need livelihood programs, but I think they actually need like dole out gid nga pagkaon kaysa sa program karon, no. But in any case, the program depends on what help on the assistance that is needed. So with that, for example, lugar no nga kaning, let's say, dili sila kailangan og livelihood karon, ang kailangan nila kay food. So, dili livelihood program ang i-recommend. Ang i-recommend kay donations for food or food donations, no? So, busa ang food donation or ang hihatag na ayuda kay dependent sa unsa kailangan nila. So, kana raman siya ang idea ani. So, let's go back to the chapter. Now we are going to also discuss about extraneous variables class, because this is actually important in determining the research design. We have to make sure that any factor that could affect the study is identified so that we can address those factors. So an extraneous variable refers to all other factors that affect the relationship between the independent and the dependent variable. So let's say, for example, dito ta sa dinhi sa in the case of the OFW example. So in this case, we see that right now class, we are now going to determine the extraneous variables class, no? So I think it would be good for us to copy this Jamboard, pero na lang. So I'm going to add another box here. So let's put another kaning column sa tunga. What are the extraneous variables? So as what you may have already read, no, kung nag-study mo sa libro, you would know that the extraneous variable, again, as mentioned sa definition, any factor that could affect the cause and effect relationship. So take, for instance, here, we see that, here that we have, in the second example, so what could affect the, unsa pa may lain things na maka-affect or na-effect sa growth sa bata. Dili ra man gid ang parents absence, di ba? Kay basin di ay religious ang bata, no? Religion or presence of another parent figure. For example, moingon ta nga dili man mo follow nga kanang naagyo effect sa social. Normal gid ang term. I don't like that term. Let's just say that a kid whose parents are OFWs are the same with children whose parents are always there. Okay, because they have another parent who takes care of them in the form of either their yaya, no? Moingon ta nga parent nila, or ilahang papa na adiha, pero ilang mama nasa gawas. In the case of some people we know, ingana man na, or wala gid sila yung mama ug papa pod kana ang nagbantay sila kay ilahang relatives, no? Pero naay present sa relatives. So kana siya extraneous variable siya kay these are factors that could affect the growth, the social and psychological growth of a child. So religion pod kay if ang bata kay kaning, help me out na lang ani class if you have other ideas of an extraneous variable, just you can say your idea, no? Kay if ang bata kay gipadako siya nga na siya values, no, nga kanang itudloan gid siya tarong values, at least sa kaning religious values. So buutan pod siguro siya pagdako niya, masking wala ang iyahang parent pagdako niya, no? Or na presence sa lain nga parent figure. What do you think? What are other variables that could affect the growth of a child? How about kaning bad or
people around?
Oo, no, Marv, no? Kana bit isa man bad influence or good influence?
Peer pressure, ma'am.
Peer pressure. Okay. So friends. Friends lang, Marv. Peer pressure and friends, medyo pareha, no? Nanong peer pressure man, Janine?
Nakoy nailhan, ma'am, nga kuan. Gipadako man sila tarong ma'am kids because naamang ko sa ilahang na ako na kuan, ma'am, ba na observe na-observe ang pagpadako sa ila. But sad to say, ang isa ka manghud sa akong friend, it turned out nga lain ang outcome niya karon, as in like inana.
Tungod sa peer pressure.
Yes, ma'am.
Sige,
Kaya wala namang good iyang mother figure na kung ano siya gakakita bitaw nga kuan ang papa ray ang iyang permi makitaan, and then ang papa pod is
absentee.
Just say na kuan na something ana.
Sige. So those are extraneous variables, mga factors nga maka-affect sa growth sa child nga kanang sa pamaylain aside sa absence niya, napaylain nga maka-apekto, right? So muna siya ang extraneous variables, and it's important in a research to identify those because those have an effect on the result of the research niya. Diyan na din mosulod ang, as you may know already, validity, reliability sa information nimo. Kung kanina yung mag-mention wala ka nag-consider nga naapay lain variable nga maka-affect sa growth sa child, then kanang dili gyud reliable imong study kay kuan siya kanang what if di ay nga religious siya or ang friends niya kay kuan maayo or dili. So I think let's just settle on these three main things lang sa for now. So whether good or bad ang friends, good or bad ang parent, or naa siya religious or dili, no, kana ang extraneous variable. So that's just an example. Now let's look at a chance or random error. So changes in the dependent variable because of the respondent's state of mood or ambiguity in the research instrument are called chance variables. So there are two aspects of a chance variable, the respondent's state of mood and ang ambiguity sa research instrument. So in a chance variable, let's add another column here. Dili siyang aside sa kuan sa respondent. So supposing that again a chance variable is composed of So a chance variable is composed of the respondent's state of mood and the research instrument. So it means that if the respondent no kan bitaw ang gitry ang research kay research na din siya sa kuan sa effects sa absence yang parents. So ayang respondent kay ang bata, what if ang bata kay dili gid bata, no, pila may edad sa inyong respondent, basically inyong sample unsa man pila edad, like teenager or bata gyud. So let's say supposing we're studying older teenagers, no, young adults na, or like older teenagers 18 to 20 baka years old. So kuan kanang what if ang katong respondent kay kuan siya kaning optimistic gid siya nga tao, optimistic person, or what if ang respondent is pessimistic gid siya, like essentially mao gid na iyahang personality. So mo na ang chance variable nga kan naka-timing kang imuhang respondent kay kanang lahi ang iyang state of mood. So naturally kuan gid siya kanang iyahaging tubag pod kay optimistic pod kay siya nga ang moingon din siya nga wala may epekto sa akong kuan sa ako ang absence ako mama kay kanang maayo man sa lang ako ang state of mind yan na bitaw class. So wala siya ang state ang chance variable. On the other hand, kani pong research instrument na apot chance variable po na siya in the sense nga let's say ang imuhang gibuhat kay wala ka nag focus group discussion, ang imo gibuhat kay survey ra. So nag-answer sila form ang bata kay instead nga imo siyang gi-focus group interview nimo, wala nimo siya gi-interview, imo lang siyang gihatagag survey form. Yeah, katong sa survey form, yes or no ra, do you think na na-affect ang pag-abot sa imong parent? Yes. So how was the effect? Kanang dili bitaw klaro ang iyang pagtubag. So kung sayop ang survey form, mao sa na siya chance variable na siya. Kay kung dili sa mao ang imong gigamit nga tool sa pagkuha sa information, kay makaapekto na siya sa results sa study. So mao lang na ang gipasabot sa chance variable o extraneous variables. And it's important to determine this in the research design because in the design it will come out na. So let's discuss further some important aspects here. So nagstorya namin siya control group class. So I think it's I'm not sure if mag-control group or let's just look at the concept of a control group, no. All right. Now, it is possible to find out the impact attributable to extraneous variables. This is done with the introduction of a control group in the design. Now, basically, looking at extraneous variables. Okay, in social science research class, it's often impossible to negate these effects altogether sa study. Imposible gyud nga imo silang nga i-delete nimo ang ilang religion sa ila. Okay, naana gid na siya, di na nimo mawala, no, kana siya, imposible na siya nga mawala na siya. So ang buhaton usually sa researcher kay dili na niya i-delete, kay dili na man na nimo ma-delete ang ilahang experience, kay inherent naman na sa respondent. Pero ang buhaton sa researcher is to measure the impact of the extraneous variable on the child. So that's the best way that the study will be valid. So again, quantify, as mentioned in the book, quantify their impact through the use of a control group. So this is lialo na nato siya. Now, okay, so to quantify the impact of religion, presence of another parent figure or friends, to quantify that, we use a control group. So in the study, perhaps what will happen is that, let's see here, no? Supposing, diri man gud sa example sa book, the sole function of a control group is to quantify the impact of extraneous variables on the dependent variables. Now, supposing, usually, the idea of a control group, and you may already know this, but just if you don't know, we see that a control group is a group that is not given an intervention, basically. So here, let's say, for instance, we have a control group wherein ang isa ka grupo kay kaning a group of children who do have parents, no, who grew up with their parents. So I guess that could be a control group, because we can see that if we compare the children who do have parents with the children who don't have parents, we can see the differences between the two. So kana siya, we can see. However, the extraneous variables, it might be good to have the extraneous variables the same for both respondents or the samples, na kay kuan siya kanang it would be good na mamili bitaw ang researcher og mga bata nga kanang relatively pareha sila in terms of religion, relatively pareha sila in terms of presence of another parent figure, pareha sila in terms of friends, no, na ay kanang mga respondents nga ang ilahang mga friends kay kuan good influence, na po yung mga respondents nga dili good influence. So medyo kuti siya gamay nga study if you think about it. Kay kung mag-introduce ka og control group dire, just like what I mentioned, the control group could then be wala ni siyang ikuha na, separate na to ning duha ka example. So the control group could be, actually class dugay gini siya mahuman nga lesson, kabalo mo nga no. kining research design class good for one sem na siya usually nga subject. Kaning research design imposible ki siya actually nga imo siyang ma-condense into 2 meetings. Nagplano naman ako nga isa ra ni ka meeting pero murag lisod gid sa kay. Sa grad school gani isa ni ka semester gina-discuss niya ato ang plan tulo ra ka meeting so murag lisod gid siya no. So tan-aw na naton sa may tabo everybody. So anyway, let's look through here lang no. Now where was I? All right, here. Now, so let's say supposing the control group is a group of children who have parents, not every child has a parent, but their parent is present and are not working abroad. So the control group would be presence of parents during childhood and teenage and so presence of parents during childhood and teenage years of their child during the. So let's say kani ang control group class no kani bitong children who grow up with parents. So kani ang control group kay ato silang i-compare ang kani nga group katong naay parents pagdako nila o katong group mga children who have OFW parents. So now that we have a control group, nga control group man sila kay para ato silang so that we use a control group in order to determine quantify the impact of the variable of the maybe quantify the impact of the dependent variable, because we will be able to determine, or rather to quantify the impact of religion or the extraneous variables on the dependent variable. In any case, mas maayo if kaning control group, the control group is the group that does not have the cause of the change, which is kaning parental absence. Kay ko ang control group kay na if the parents are present, so we assume nga kanang different ni sila nga mga bata sa mga bata nga OFW ang ilang parents. So to compare the two, na siya kanang aspect. I guess that's an easy way to explain what a control group is, and just to say that or discuss that in class. Let's now go to the research designs, now the types of research designs. So this is where things get a little, too much informational. Dagan kayo information ni siya nga chapter. So, try lang nato og simplify, no? So, selecting a study design. So let's just go immediately to the discussion. Sige. Let's now go immediately to the types of research designs. So study designs in quantitative research. So this relates to more mathematical types of investigation, no nga kuan siya, not exactly qualitative, but I guess there were differences between qualitative and quantitative. You mentioned there is a book, differences between quantitative and qualitative study designs, but basically these are the same. So all of these research designs can be applied to both qualitative and quantitative research. Now there were 3 different perspectives in there are many research designs class, meaning plans now on how to go about research study, but the numerous research designs are grouped into 3. And these 3 groupings are the following: the number of contacts with the study population. So when we say number of contacts with the study population, this pertains to how often you will survey the sample. So take for instance in a research wherein you need to meet the sample or you need to survey the sample 3 times no throughout the research study. Kay take for instance kani sa COVID karon, like for example, we're trying to determine kung lisod man ni siyang idea. Maybe we'll try to use the same example earlier. So, let's see. Let's take, for instance, the first example that we had. How often should we measure the effect of social media posts? I think lisod gyapon siya example. Kung ano lang, let's make a completely different example na lang for contacts with the study population. So for this part, let's say for instance that there are some research studies wherein you can just survey your respondents at one time. So just like in the example earlier, I think this is an example of a cross-sectional research design, no? Meaning you just need to like study them at one time. You just need to survey or interview them at one time, and you don't really need to interview them in another year or so, because this is just a cross-sectional research design. More about what a cross-sectional research design is later or shortly. But there are some research studies that you need to meet with the respondents in another time period. So that's what we mean by contacts, the number of contacts with the study population. So take for instance, let's say in IS, no research in IS, we are trying to study the historical, no, let's say politics or elections. So elections-wise, Filipinos, kani magong elections, kay di ba sige pag-survey og poll, kay kanang naman tay polls kung kinsay mudagan. So karon kay si Sara Duterte ang galid sa polls, pero kanang dagan pod mga close seconds no karon sa elections 2022. So in a longitudinal study or kaning naa may tulo ka types no, longitudinal before and after o longitudinal before and after studies. Kaning longitudinal, this is an example of a longitudinal study class no nga. The respondents are surveyed every month or so, every quarter. So dili lang ka ikausa mo duol sa respondent pero ikatagahan. Pero usually kaning selection kay random naman sa ilang sample, dili man nga same lang nga people ang ilang gina-study. Actually every time nga mag-poll or mag-poll sila o kinsay iboto nila sa election kay lahi man na random sampling siya. Pero supposing kuan na lang ta, just like what is mentioned here, the number of contacts with the study population, basically this group of research designs relate towards how often you will survey your respondents, all right? So with that, in this example, i-park lang sa nako siyang idea dira. Basta let's just continue with this, no? And here, so all right. So now let's look through. All right. So let's look through the types of research designs under the first group. But just to mention the two other groups, we also have two other perspectives or groups of research designs, and these are, the second is the reference period of the study. So reference period points towards if you are looking at past data, present data, or prospective data. When we say prospective data, it refers to like kanibitaw kuan ka say term ganit on the tip of my tongue. Mag-predict ka, yeah. So predicting a future occurrence. So that refers to a reference period of the study. There are types of research designs wherein the researcher would reference a time in the past, a time in the present, or rather the present, and or the researcher would reference or would try to predict a phenomenon in the future based on present information. So kana siya, those are katong the one that we mentioned earlier, retrospective data, looking at past data. So, and then third is the nature of the investigation. So this relates towards what is the nature of the investigation. Are we trying to look at the actual cause and effect of an intervention. Take for instance, there is a OFW parents, although dili man siya experimental tech. I actually kuan ni siya non-experimental study ni ang kuan ang kaning sa OFW ng example. But the nature of the study or the nature of the investigation is somewhat these types of research designs relate towards how the research is conducted. So there are three examples now: experimental, non-experimental, and quasi-experimental. So because the nature of the research is that the researcher wants to see the effect of the independent variable. So the researcher would create an experiment to measure the effect of the independent variable. So kani mga researcher usually sa kuan sa kanibitang sa sciences kan maghimo sila og experiment yun mismo, eksperimentuhan nato ni kung naabay epekto ni siya nga factor sa action ani nga tao. So kung ako na siyang buhaton, ay ko experiment nga kanang na I change may tabo no. Pero kuan siya, experiment lang siya, more siya gi-design siya nga situation kay para kuan para makita ang effect sa isa ka factor. All right. So it's almost time. So but in any case, just to point that out. And then however, I think I'll just end their class kay kuan siya kanang more to atong pwede ma-discuss basically for the time. So looking through here, I guess under the number of contacts with the study population, we have these types of research designs: cross-sectional before and after studies, and then longitudinal. Under the second one, we have reference period of the study. These include retrospective, prospective, and retrospective, prospective. Retrospective is past data. Prospective is looking towards future occurrences. And then retrospective, prospective pertains to using past data to predict the future possible occurrences. Then the third group pertains to the nature of the investigation, as mentioned earlier, experimental and non-experimental. Asan man to? Anara. Dear Lord, dagan pa man di kaayo kuan. Study designs in qualitative research. So actually daghan pagid kay sa class no, marag lang. Where am I going? Focus group discussion, case study, cohort studies, trend studies. These are actually for quantitative research, everybody. Naapoy other research designs for qualitative data research. So we'll just continue on Monday. In any case, wala murag na unawala na ang kuan paging. Okay, here we are, experimental study. So for the nature of investigation, study designs based on the nature of investigation, we have experimental, non-experimental, and then quasi or semi-experimental. We'll continue with this discussion on Monday. So basically on Monday, we will discuss research designs, continuation, and then measurement scales and selecting a sample. Probably maka-klase pa ta ani haning kuan pa day class kani 22 o 25 sa March kay mag-exam ta pero kaning topics on where was that? Okay, here's our calendar. So in any case, this topic is basically moved to everybody. We are currently discussing about research methodologies or research designs. So this topic now is, we are just currently discussing about research designs for this week and next week. So this has been moved to March. You see, look at the calendar. This has been moved to March 1, 4, and 8. And then statistics will be discussed on March 8. No? And then the lesson on instrumentation, or rather, this is not really statistics. The lesson is on measurement scales and selecting a sample, as well as I think diya naman gud mosulod ang statistics kung unsa ang sample, kinaay ka ng statistics involved sa pag-compute pilay sample size. So that will be the lesson for March 8. And then on March 11, our lesson will be on research instrumentation, or kaning creating survey forms and doing focus group discussion, doing interviews. And then probably kana lang ang coverage sa midterms, kikaning measurement and reliability and validity. Basically, data analysis, we'll just discuss it on the 22nd and 25th. And then that will be like semi-finals kay Holy Week na ni siya dire. So 22 and 25. Okay, any questions? Right, seeing none, I'll stop the recording now. Thank you, everybody.